Julian, thank you very much for being here. Thank you for your time.
I'm delighted to be here.
Really appreciate that you're taking the time to answer to my questions. And let me say, for those that don't know, we had a call prior to this one, and I had the opportunity to meet you, and I found it an extremely fascinating conversation. So I'm looking forward to today. Julian, Masonic author. When and how did you decide to become a writer?
That's a difficult one because actually I've been writing odd things all my life, ever since I was at school. But what prompted me to start writing on Masonic topics was the launch of the then independent Freemasonry magazine, Freemasonry Today, which was launched in 1997. And at that time, I was having dinner with a friend of mine who was on the board of the new magazine, which had just been formed, who said to me, "Julian, can you find me an editor for the magazine? We haven't got one." So I then suggested Tobias Churton, who then became the editor. And the first thing Toby did was to say to me, would I write an article for the magazine? So I thought about this and I penned him a very short article, which immediately attracted interest in the first issue. And a number of people commented on it and sent back replies. So Toby thought that I was obviously a good thing, so he asked me to write another article for issue number 2, which I did, and he devoted a whole page to it this time. So I was obviously launched on the road to literary stardom, let's say.
Yeah.
So anyway, cut a long story short, I continued to write for the magazine, I think almost every issue thereafter, and then Michael Bagent became the editor.
Yeah.
And under Michael Bagent, I became the deputy editor. And then at a certain point, Martin Fawkes came to me from Lewis Masonic.
Yes.
And said, look, we need the handbooks which JSM Ward wrote many years ago. They need updating. Would I take on the task? So I did. And but in the end, Lewis decided to publish it as a single volume, not as 3 individual little volumes, under the title Making Light. And that was my first book with Lewis Masonic.
When you start writing those articles in those years, were you free to choose the subject upon which you had to choose, or you were asked in order to present those articles to Freemasonry Today?
No, they always let me choose my own topic.
Okay, understood. That's nice. So you were free to explore the different elements of Freemasonry that you thought were relevant back then.
Absolutely, yes.
Fascinating. Julian, which author inspired you?
That's a tricky one because there were so many. But one of my chief inspirations was Colin Dyer. Colin wrote The Symbols of Freemasonry. I think Symbolism in Craft Freemasonry is the book. It's also published by Lewis. But the person who inspired me most in writing was Michael Bagent. Holy Blood and Holy Grail.
Correct.
Who by then was the editor of Freemasonry Today. And he helped me a great deal with my writing, and I can look back on some of my earlier articles and see how his influence and his advice has helped me to develop and to become a better writer. But amongst, Colin Dyer, Michael Bagent, there have been one or two others, but to be honest, when you read in Masonic literature, you gain a little bit from almost everything. Yasha Beresina himself has inspired me. All sorts of people have inspired me. Robert Lomas
Yeah.
has inspired me. So, I think all of us who write on Masonic topics, somehow we tend to feed off each other.
Julian, can I go back 1 second to your first book? You just mentioned it, Making Light. It was 2003. Back then, you were asked to update a book, and you present the reader of those years with this handbook about the journey to self-knowledge and self-improvement. We are 18 years off, almost celebrating the 20 years of your first book. Do you see the current generation still asking for such a handbook and such direction to self-knowledge and self-improvement?
Well, in answer to your question, is my book still in demand? The brief answer is yes, it's selling as well as it did at the beginning, or even better. As regards the readership of those days and the readership today, back then, when we founded the Cornerstone Society, the idea that there was a deeper meaning in Freemasonry hadn't really impinged on many people's consciousness. So when we started talking about the deeper meaning in Freemasonry, a whole lot of people came up with their own ideas of how Freemasonry might be more than just a social and dining club, how Freemasonry had a deeper meaning to impart. And we'll come on to this later, but I think the advent of technology, of computers and the internet, has played a big part in this. All of a sudden, people are much more interested in what happens deep down when we become initiated, passed and raised. And I find this very encouraging. The young people today, men and women who are initiated and passed and raised, are finding that that there's something of real value for them rather than just, as I say, a social and dining club. And I find that hugely encouraging. So yes, I think there's been a marked advancement in interest in Masonic topics since I wrote my first book.
Julian, you're not just an author. I had the pleasure to research your work, and looking on your website, julianrees.com, you don't just present your books or articles, you actually share with us videos where you present elements about your work and the way that you look at things. In the lecture that is on the website, The Way to the Center, you refer to the eyes, the sense sight, as the most important of the senses. Can I challenge you on this one? In fact, I believe the sight actually limits our capability to perceive, feel, as it leads us to a quick judgment. We see people too tall, too short, too fat, too thin. Can you elaborate on why you see sight as an important sense?
I see it as important, but it is only one of the five senses. Now, with our eyes alone, you're absolutely right. We will not see everything. In Antoine de Saint-Exupéry's Little Prince, the fox says, I'm not so sure about seeing with the eyes. I can't remember the exact words. It's something like, you need to see with the heart. With the eyes only, you can't perceive that which is important. And that is true. We're talking about a difference here between seeing and perceiving.
I see.
I can see with my eyes, but I can perceive with my heart. Now, Freemasonry is full of allegories and symbols. Those allegories are there not for us to look at, but for us to perceive. We need to look at the allegories and symbols and work out for ourselves what they actually mean. The hidden mysteries of nature and science are there. Why? Because they want us to reveal them. The point about Freemasonry is it's an experiential pursuit. That means that I have to actually do it in order to be it. So here I am looking at a lot of symbols and allegories, and I'm working them out for myself, because without that, Freemasonry will be meaningless. And it needs my work to bring forth these things, to make them real. In the prayer, as you know, in emulation, the Master says, "Endue him with the competency of thy divine wisdom, that assisted by the secrets of our Masonic art, he may the better be enabled to unfold the beauties of true godliness." That's what we're there for, to unfold things, to bring them to being.
Julian, in your lecture, The Journey of Your Life, you present the importance of the journey. You just mentioned in your answer, we actually have to physically experience the journey. When you say that, one of the first images that I had in my mind was famous journeys that we know exist today on different areas of the world. One of them is Compostela, where people start a physical journey across a specific geography in order for them, at a certain point of the journey, to reconnect with their spiritual self, or the inner self that they're looking for. Joseph Campbell, in The Hero's Journey, explains that we all go through a journey in our lives, and the struggle that we have to go through will help us at the end, if we continue in this journey, find the answers that we are looking for. But now we are almost 1.5 years in a lockdown. We live out of a Zoom call. We live out of digital connections. We can't have those physical interactions. So how do you see technology having an impact on the capability of finding true spirituality? And is this lack of physical challenge an impediment to achieve such journey?
It's interesting that you mentioned the lockdown, because paradoxically, what the lockdown has done is to give us a new opportunity to open up a different world for us. Let me explain what I mean.
Please.
I am currently master of my lodge, and because we weren't able to meet physically, we held Zoom meetings. That's okay. But I introduced something else into my lodge life, and it was this. I started a project which I called Learning More. And what this project was I posed a question to all the lodge members. I blind copied them in an email, all my lodge members. I posed a question to them, something like, okay, that's it. I've been chipping away at my rough ashlar. Now I've got a perfect ashlar. That's it. Now I can relax. And I asked them in not more than 5 lines to respond to that. Well, I got a storm of responses. People saying to me, hold on, until I've become Jesus or the Buddha or Allah, I will never be perfect. So what are you talking about? You know, see, it was deliberately provocative.
Yeah.
And so from that flowed, and then, you see, I sent all those responses, again by blind copy, to all the lodge members. So they all knew what they were all talking about.
Yeah.
And that, it was like a tree. It grew branches. All sorts of things happened. People were talking about advancing from darkness to light. They were talking about talking about physical death versus allegorical death. They were talking about all sorts of things. And from this, you know, we developed a whole range of stuff. Now, I anticipate that when the lockdown is over, we're going to go on with this, because I think it's much too rich a thing to follow. And people gain from it, they learn from it, they contribute to it, so they never feel I'm being preached at. They always feel they're part of the consultation. I think I've stumbled across something really rather good there. And I think other lodges might do well to copy it.
Yeah.
So that's just me being arrogant.
No. Actually, showing that from a challenge, you make an opportunity instead of just letting it stop you, etc.
Yeah.
Did you notice a higher level of engagement of the members of your lodge, once that there was this, if somebody answered, then you feel like, oh, then I can give my answer as well, and then there was a sort of push to continue the conversation.
Absolutely. It happened much more than would have happened in a physical lodge meeting. In a physical lodge meeting, if somebody reads a piece of architecture and then everybody is asked to comment on it, you can wait sometimes many minutes before somebody plucks up the courage to come back and say. So here we've got a forum where people, without feeling self-conscious, without feeling, everybody's watching me or listening to me.
The judgment of the eyes.
They can just put their thoughts down on the screen and let them go out into the ether. Wow. And so in a way, I'm not saying that we don't need physical lodge meetings. Of course we do, because we will never initiate, pass and raise people unless we do. But this is a different dimension. This adds something to it. This makes it, in a way, more real.
Yeah.
Although it's virtual, it is, in a way, more real.
Julian, your last book, Freemasonry for the Heart and Mind. What did inspire you to write this book? And if you look in 20 years, like we just mentioned about the Making Light, what do you see happening?
Well, if you look at the different articles in that book, Freemasonry for the Heart and Mind, you may recognize, if you're old enough, and you're not, you may recognize the vestiges of some of the articles I wrote way back for Freemasonry Today, before the year 2000. What I did with Freemasonry for the Heart and Mind was I picked articles that I had written in the past, I added to them, I took things from other parts of what I'd written and melded them together and made an article out of them. And each one of those in Freemasonry for the Heart and Mind has something of importance to say to people about the condition of their life. I mean, one of them is entitled Routine or Ritual, right? In which I challenge the reader to think, when I'm going through my lodge meeting, is it just a dull routine that I've practiced many times before, or is there something deeper to it? Is there a ritual aspect? Out of sight, out of mind is another title of one of my articles in that book. Do we purposely put things aside that are uncomfortable for us, that we don't want to talk about, that we don't want to think about? And if so, why? And how can we not do it? And so forth. It's a bit of a didactic thing, I admit, but it seems to have had a good reception. So in terms of how Freemasonry evolves, I mean, yes, we go back now to the year 2000, and probably that book wouldn't have sold in the year 2000 because people's perception of Freemasonry was so different then. Now, I get the feeling that people are very ready to listen to these sort of arguments about Freemasonry. So, it's selling very well. It seems to be doing quite well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an inspiring book, and the articles that you mentioned, I totally recognize them. Can I ask you a question that you just inspired me during the conversation? I mean, you have done a retrospective with this book and then presented it today for the audience of today. You just mentioned that in your current lodge, you challenge your members with questions and then you start building things. Are you preparing your next book with the inspiration of how COVID has inspired people to be more open about the questions?
Who knows?
I will keep this one then. Julian, that was the last question. I truly enjoyed the time that we spent together. Thank you so much for your time and the inspiration of what you write and the videos that you post, because it really helps at least put me in a condition to ask me questions, and that's what I find inspiring.
Thank you, Antonio.